I fight for the greater good.
Kraken Lord of Karen.
Fearless.
Hello everybody and welcome to our first 20-turn guide. Today we are playing as Lokhir Fellheart and doing the first 20 turns to what will hopefully be a successful campaign. The purpose of this guide is only as a reference. There are multiple ways to start your first 20 turns, and I will even be mentioning some of them as we go through the campaign. The first fight is auto-resolved, as you will recover in time for the second, and on top of that I have done that fight multiple times and just couldn't be bothered to do it. Following on from the battle, we will be disbanding our Bleak Swords and the two Black Ark Corsairs on the Black Ark. Along with that, we will be taking the Route Marcher ability, which will give us an extra 10% movement speed and will be crucial for us to get into position for the next turn. The other crucial step is recruiting two Black Ark Corsairs, which you recruit from the Black Ark, along with two Dark Shards and a Dreadspear Regiment. We also get the Founded on Tyranny technology, as well as disbanding the military building in our starting settlement. The reason why we do this is because we've got one in the Mark of the Old Gods, and we want to make room for the gold mine in our starting settlement. Now, going back to why we sold our Bleak Swords and got rid of the two Black Ark Corsairs on the Black Ark, we did that in order to have enough money. Without selling them, the upkeep cost becomes too much and we aren't able to recruit 5 more units on the second turn. The second turn's pretty straightforward. Moving Lokhir down to the capital city, as far as he will go, in the normal stance, then recruiting 2 more Black Ark Corsairs and 3 Dark Shards, as well as now purchasing the gold mine. Moving on to the third turn. Now the idea is to declare war on Clan Ashen. Luckily for us, the lord that they've just recruited on the previous turn is in such a position that it sets up for a nice choke point battle for us. Make sure, because what I did there was move the Black Ark into position to cover you. If you don't do that, you won't get any of the bombardment skills and it will make this fight a lot tougher than it should be.
Corsair handbows! Battle ready!
Obviously, it's extremely hard to have a guide on how the battles should roll out, especially when you don't have any control over the AI. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show the full length of the battles, and just occasionally when I think there's an important keynote, to point it out so you know either why I chose to do it, or what the effect of what I did has, if that makes any sense. Main things to note is I put the Lord. Main things to note, I put Lokhir and the Manticore both on hotkeys, just because they're the two main units that I want to reposition quickly. Main reason why I do it for the Manticore is because the Manticore is very good at taking out the menaces below. So being able just to press the hotkey number 2 and get it in to dive on the menace below, as you can see me doing here, just makes it happen a lot quicker. Now, one other thing that I want to point out is killing off the Lord is extremely important because it will provide a debuff to the rest of the enemy army, which I can then take advantage of with the Manticore's Fear and Terrify.
Yes, I will. Murder is mine.
Dark Shards! Onwards to murder! We are ready! Battle calls by your command! Cold-blooded killers!
Now coming up, what you're going to see me do is try to snipe out the Lord with the Black Ark artillery shot. It's not the smartest thing to do, unfortunately, because there was no guarantee that the Lord wouldn't speed up and move out of its range, or that it would kill the Lord. Now, in this circumstance, it didn't. And that could have really messed with me killing the Lord, because if the Lord had broken because of the damage that I had done to him, I wouldn't have been able to kill him off, which means that the rest of the enemy army wouldn't have taken, I think it's initially minus 16, and then minus 10 leadership. Which, as you can imagine, for the Skaven, is a significant chunk of that leadership being taken away. That combined with Fear, which causes minus 8 leadership, and then Terror, which breaks a unit, or it doesn't really break a unit, but makes a unit flee for a few seconds once it's reached 14 leadership or lower. It's very important in this fight, and we get that Fear and Terror fight from the Manticore.
I'll give the order. I dare! Horses, slay!
Now, I realized I messed up, so I used the Black Arc Artillery shot to take out the Lord. This was extremely lucky on my part. Normally that wouldn't have happened, but it just worked out that way. One thing I'd like to mention is there are a few prime targets to try and focus fire on if you can. There are Plague Monk Census Bearers, which are a must focus fire. Normally 2 Dark Shard regiments, focus firing them will do the trick. There are 2 Plague Monk regiments, which also need to be brought down potentially, just because of their high leadership. There's also the Rat Ogres. They provide fear, which you would like to remove as quickly as possible. And then outside of the actual units, there is, of course, Lord Skrolk, who you would like to kill. And the second Lord from another army, which is coming to attack you. Now, that Lord, ideally, you want to do a lot of damage, but you don't want to kill it. And the reason for that is because in the next fight, if you could bring him down to low life and then kill him off, you can get the same debuff to the enemy's leadership, which is a great help during that fight too. Now, one thing you may not have noticed, and that's because I generally ignore it completely because it's not really important. There was no significant moving around on my part. I just kind of ignored it completely, and that is the Plague Claw Catapult. It has been shooting at my army this entire time. There's nothing you can do with it. There's nothing that you can do about it, because unfortunately it's too far away. Your only option to actually try and take it out, which would work, would be sending the Manticore. But in doing so, it would require you to kind of lose out on the Fear and Terror fight that the Manticore provides, which would actually be the worst thing you could do. So we just completely ignore it. If you're extremely lucky, the army will lose it when they're retreating. It's just a mechanic that sometimes if you retreat, even if your artillery doesn't take any damage, it will just be removed. That's not 100% of the case, and it doesn't happen in this battle, but it can sometimes.
Lokhir Fellheart!
Corsairs, my cane!
Step back, come back!
Corsair handbows, moving out!
Kill!
Dread spears!
Save my own fur!
Now, what I'm doing here is I'm doing a lot of damage to this Lord, but I'm leaving them alive just slightly. The reason for that is in the start of the next fight, I will be using that to my advantage by killing off the Lord very quickly on the next fight and getting the same reduced leadership that I got when I killed off the Lord in this fight that we just did. I personally always pick the enslavement action after the fight. The reason why I do that is because the replenishment I think is pretty much the best thing you can get, as well as being able to get more slaves, which provide you with a higher income.
Lokhir Fellheart.
Now, after I get the Marcher, the next skill that I invest into is Dreaded Slaver. This is because it increases the amount that you replenish, as well as the amount of slaves that you get, which increase your economy. What we're doing now is we're doing a battle for the actual capital city itself. Following on from that choke point match, the capital city's defenses is very weakened, which pretty much makes taking the capital trivial in comparison to where it would have been before. Now, most of the time, when it comes to sieges, you'll see me basically deploy on either the left or the right most flank. The reason for doing that is because, generally speaking, most of the fort towers won't be able to hit you when you're on one of the flanks, because obviously it then has the edge of the map. If I was to deploy in the middle, more of the fort towers would most likely be able to attack me. So that's just the preference there. So this battle pretty much plays out with I send the Black Ark Corsairs to climb up the wall, move forward with the Dark Shards, lets them do a lot of the range damage, and then move forward with the rest of the melee infantry, and kind of just use them where I need them. I also send the Manticore onto the left flank, and then I kind of I kind of charge it down into the Night Runners, because then it just basically cancels out their ability to use their missile attacks, and then all I have to worry about my melee units being attacked by are the fort towers. Outside of that, as soon as the Black Ark's artillery has cooled down, I use it to basically snipe out the Lord. And then I also send Lokhir up on the wall as well. Now, I can't remember if that Lord... Yeah, he moves. That was just unlucky. Normally he doesn't, so I think I have to rely on using one of the Black Ark... not the Black Ark Corsairs, sorry. The Dark Shards. I normally just rely on that to then take out the Lord. It doesn't really matter. It's not super huge. But most of the time, you can just get the Black Ark artillery shard to take out the Lord for you.
Not my fight.
Corsair handbows! Onwards to murder!
Roman scum!
Carnage awaits!
Suffering for all!
Destroy!
We are ready! Blood for Cain!
Yeah! Corsair handbows! We are ready! It is done! Dread spear!
To destruction!
Actually, thinking about it, it wasn't the Dark Shards that I used. Yeah, I tried to use them, but for some reason they couldn't get line of sight. They kept moving forward, so I had to use a second bombardment skill from the Black Ark, and then I used that to take out the Lord.
No mercy!
And now we've taken the capital city on turn 3. Now I normally just occupy the settlements. The reason why, obviously, sacking, looting, and occupying it does give more money, but it also gives worse minus public order. And we want to try and delay having a rebellion as much as possible. Now, one thing to note here is move forward with the Black Ark, and then what we do is we recruit a Lord. Now, the reason why we do this is so that we can actually take the Mangrove Cove on the next turn. So on turn 4, we will have our entire province. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is the Lord that you recruit needs to be above loyalty 4. If they are at loyalty 3 or less, they will rebel when you disband them, and you want to disband them. Also note, Skrolk will attack you. Now you can't leave Lokhir, you can't take Lokhir out of the capital. If you do that, the capital unfortunately does not have any garrison within it at the moment, and so Skrolk will bypass your army and just immediately take the capital city back. So you need to leave Lokhir in there. The downside is obviously you won't be able to replenish, but it's better than losing the capital city. Also note that you won't be recruiting any more units. You need to have your upkeep at this level in order to have enough money to be able to purchase things later on in the campaign. So now, we can easily take Mangrove Cove. It does cost 2,500, but it's better to have the actual city. So they see me disbanding the Lord, which reduces the overall upkeep for my army. Now, fighting against Skrolk, I could just auto-resolve it, but it's pretty much up to you. It's a little bit more risky to auto-resolve it, but it's not that damaging if you choose not to. Now, following on with this, once again, it is a choke point fight, which is one of the really important things, because it makes the fight much easier. It's pretty straightforward. You don't really have to do much. Main things that you can do is the same bombardment arc skill, the top one, that you saw me use to snipe out the Lords. You can actually use that to snipe out the Plague catapults. It's slow, but sometimes it's one of the best things. Each time you use it, you basically deny them using one of their catapults. That does reduce their damage capabilities by quite a bit. The rest of the army, though, it's so massively reduced, and you've got such good range units that there's very little chance that you would ever possibly lose this.
Lokhir Fellheart!
Battle ready. Blood for Cain. No survivors.
By Cain!
Druki. As you say. Dark shards. By Cain!
Dealers in death! The winds are against
Dark
us!
shards. Behold the suffering for all.
God! Yes!
I sense defeat.
Merciless warriors!
Eager for battle. By Drakira. Massacre them.
Corsairs! It is done! Behold the Kraken hell! Feel my wrath!
Tired of this? Murder awaits.
We losing!
End them! Corsairs!
The merciless host!
Dark shards! By Cain!
On the move!
We are ready! Understood.
The Kraken agrees!
Now with that victory, once more we enslave the captives, which gives us more replenishment, and finally max out our Dread Slaver skill as well. And then for the final remnants of the army, we can just auto-resolve it, because there's not really enough there to pose a threat.
Kraken! Lord of the Sea! Admiral of Kar's fleets! This will do!
Now we put 1 point in Inspiring Presence, as we get ready to put more of our skill points into our army buffs.
Do not vex us further!
Now on turn 4, we upgrade the Mangrove Cove to finally actually be at level 1 instead of a ruin. We also sell the military building in our capital city because we've already got one in Mark of the Old Ones. Now that we've got the entire province, we set the commandment to demand highborn hostages, which increase public order by 4. It's also time for us to start sending the Black Ark over towards the east, which will allow us to gain access to the followers of Nagash, and that should lead on to a trade agreement later on. Now on turn 5, you'll notice just north there is an army sent towards the Marks of the Old Ones by Clan Ashen. The timing of when this army arrives is roughly between turn 5 and turn 6. But don't be afraid, you actually do have the time to move towards Mark of the Old Ones in order to intercept this. The rest of the turn is pretty much building up our cities. As you can see there, we have enough growth to upgrade our capital, but instead I decided to go for the exotic animal building because I wanted to get more trade resources to hopefully entice the followers of Nagash into a trade agreement. It would have been that, or it would have been the other economy building. As well as moving the Black Ark close to the followers of Nagash and getting continuous slave supplies on the research, and then moving Lokhir in the march dance up north, ready to intercept. Now you can see that Clan Ashen has moved slightly forward, but they are still not within attacking distance of Mark of the Old Ones. You have two options here. On turn 8, you will have the option to either have peace with Clan Ashen. I think it's kind of scripted that way. It always seems to be the case that on turn 8 you can just have peace, or you can do what I did here, and I went into the ambush stance hoping that Clan Ashen would come forward and I would be able to attack them. We also did get a rebellion. That is planned for, don't worry about it. It's a very weak one, and of course we moved the Black Ark again. Now, we got lucky here, and not only did Clan Ashen not discover our ambush, but they also moved closer to Mark of the Old Ones, and then we got to intercept them. Now, while this does look like the balance of power is 50-50, it's very much in our favor. This is a result of they only have 3 range units, and those range units aren't that strong, whereas we have a very strong army in terms of the Black Ark Corsairs being anti-infantry. They also have a large amount of armor as well. I believe it's 80 armor, and then our Dark Shards as well are a very good range unit early on as well. That combined with the Manticore causing Fear and Terrify, and then of course Lokhir so we can try and snipe out any of the Lords. It actually makes for quite an easy fight, and because it is an interception fight, it also means that when we win this, the entire army or enemy army is wiped out. It would also mean though that if we lose, the entire our army would be wiped out. So you've got to be a little bit careful when it comes to interception fights.
Battle ready. Stop.
Skaven everywhere!
Understood. Lokhir Fellheart. Kraken Lord.
Corsairs! Forward!
Slash. Kill.
Destroy!
Eager for battle.
Nagorothy! Dark Shards!
Forward.
Battle ready! Corsairs!
Dread Spears. End them.
Corsairs!
Kill. Battle ready.
Make them bleed! Corsairs! Forward! Corsair handbows! Corsairs! We are ready!
We are ready.
Dark Shards! Druki!
Understood.
Eager for battle!
Corsair handbows. I dare. Gone. Corsair handbows! Dread spears!
Taruki, it is done!
Dread spears! Dealers in death! Die, weaklings! Corsair handbows! Moving out! It is done!
No survivors! No mercy!
Merciless warriors! Attack! Hack! Cut! Corsairs! Understood! Without question! Onwards to murder! Dark shards! By Cain! Corsair handbows! Dark shards! Dark elves! Slash! Kill!
Glorious destruction!
No survivors! By Drakira! Murder awaits!
Now you're going to see me stellar stepping the Black Arc, because I didn't think that we'd actually made contact with the followers of Nagash, so I was moving slightly so that I don't have to use all my movement speed and then I could start moving back towards my settlements, but apparently I already had access to them. So with the defeat of Clan Ashen, I'm going to be moving back now to deal with the rebellion. I'll also be having peace with Clan Ashen as well. Normally you can always get it on turn 8, but because of the victory we can now get it on turn 7. Not only that, but we got money from winning the fight, we got money from the extra slaves from winning the fight, and then we can also charge them money for the peace as well. Now the way that I do this is I slowly increase the amount that I demand from them until it changes from high to moderate. This allows us to upgrade the gold mine as well as upgrading the mangrove coast. Now it's important at this point to upgrade the mangrove coast, because what's going to happen later on is Teclis will attack us around turn 13 or 14. It's important to get a defensive building in Mangrove Coast at that point so that we can basically defend one city while the other city can defend itself. Turn 8 pretty much sees me trying to think of the best way to get replenishment while not having the rebellion attack my army, because I want it to attack the capital city. Now, of course, if my army was at full health, I would have moved into the capital city, but I want my replenishment, so I don't want to get sieged. You also see me move my Black Arc over towards the followers from Nagash, realize I should have definitely spotted them by now, and then seen that the game had already given me access to them. Now, I'm not sure when that had happened, but I think because of that, I wasn't able to get a trade agreement with Ark and the Black, which is very unfortunate, but it just works out that way sometimes. You can't always 100% get the trade agreement, but if it does work out, it's very much worth it. Apart from that, I also upgrade one of the settlement buildings to a higher rank. It doesn't really matter which building. All generic buildings until rank 3 are exactly the same in terms of their stats, and then I end the turn. But it was then that I realized my mistake. The rebellion already had 20 regiments in its army, which is the maximum it could have. Now, the only reason not to attack the rebellion is to allow it to recruit more, which means that after you finish the fight, you get more slaves from it. The reason why this is kind of important if you do end up having a rebellion is because when a rebellion is spawned, it takes a percentage of the slaves from that city, and you lose them. On Legendary, it's very hard to not have a rebellion. Now, with this being so early on, we can actually use having the rebellion to our advantage by allowing the rebellion to grow to its full size, which is 20 regiments. And I've just noticed that there's only 18 regiments in this army, so I made a mistake. But because this is so early on, because the amount of slaves that you lose is based on a percentage, the slaves that we had to lose was a very small amount at the time. So as a result, the amount of slaves that we're going to get from this rebellion, allowing it to get so big, far outweighs the slaves that we lost early on. Now, this isn't always going to be the case. If you have tens of thousands of slaves, it's not worth having a rebellion, but also later on in the game you also have far more building slots to be able to increase your public order and stop a rebellion from actually forming. So this is just like an early game tactic that you can use in a way to buff your economy.
Corsair handbows! Lokhir Fellheart! Yes!
At once! Understood!
Lokhir Fellheart! Destruction comes! Dark shards! It is done! At once! Attack!
Orders understood! By Cain! At once! As you say! Nagorothi! Corsairs!
Dark shards!
Corsairs! Battle calls!
Merciless warriors! Advancing! Dark shards! Understood! Druki! Onwards to murder! Druki, forward! Red blades, dogs! Agreed! Blood will flow!
Dealers in death!
Iceman stinks legs!
Taruki! At once! At once! Slash! Kill!
Corsair handbows!
Dealers in death!
Lokhir Fellheart!
As you say!
It is done!
Nagorothi! Understood! It is done! Nagorothi! The merciless host! Die, weaklings! Corsairs! Dark shards! Dealers in death! Dread spears! Eager for battle! We understand!
Corsair handbows!
Dark elves! Battle ready! Moving out! Dark shards! Merciless warriors!
With pleasure! Hack! Cut!
Orders understood! Corsairs! Merciless warriors! My blade hungers! It is done!
Back! Summon my ship!
With pleasure! Dark shards! Destroy!
Lokhir Fellheart! Dark shards! Die, weaklings! Merciless warriors! Death and plunder! On the move!
Cold-blooded killers! On to slaughter! terror and death.
It will be.
With this victory, it actually puts us in a good position. You will see me check to see if I can actually follow up and attack the rebellion. I can't. A way to check this is by selecting your army, holding down right click on the enemy army, and if it goes red on your campaign movement speed, it means that you actually can't make it. If it's green, it means you can actually make it to the army. Now, I put point into Slaughterlord, because we will be using Sisters of Slaughter mainly in this army as a front line. And then also I'm able to move into capital, which will give me increased replenishment as well. One more thing to note is while I didn't allow the rebellion to get to 20 regiments, I think it actually got to 18, it was no longer recruiting more, so it actually worked out for the best. Now the rebellion did siege me after, so what I'll be doing now is doing the Ritual of Authority, which will increase my public order by extra 8. It only costs 100 slaves, so it is actually very worthwhile doing, just to try and increase your public order. Now, you can just auto-resolve this fight. I didn't because my Manticore is extremely low, but the fight's extremely easy at this point. The rebellion will be destroyed, which will give you a military crackdown bonus to your public order, which is a bonus that starts off at... I'm not sure what the number's based on, but it starts off at a high number. So, for example, say it starts off at 8, and then after 8 turns, it will slowly go down and down until it disappears. So it will go from 8 to 7 to 6 to 5 and so on until it disappears completely. And then we've also got that ritual buff as well, which means public order-wise, we should be able to completely avoid any further rebellions.
Lokhir Fellheart! Agreed!
Dark shards! Battle ready! The merciless host! Hack! Cut!
My cane! Rookie forward! Moving out! Lokhir Fellheart! At once! Corsairs! Attack! Slash! Kill!
Battle ready! By your command!
Dark shards! We lose it! My cane!
Massacre them! The merciless host!
It will be! The mask of fear! Save my own blood! I'm brave, but not now! Lokhir Fellheart! Summon my ship! Come back!
Die, weakling!
Kraken!
Dark shards! Hack them!
We make poor the Kraken Lord always wins!
Now we can follow up once more, finish off the rebellion. I also put one more point into Slaughterlord as well. Now I did decide to actually take this battle out of the video just because it was very straightforward, there was not a lot going on, and it pretty much takes longer for the game to load into it and out of the fight than it does to actually do the fight itself. And then because we also got unlucky and the rebellion got to retreat once more, I decided just to take a risk and auto-resolve it. Did really put my Manticore at risk there. Luckily it survived, and now the rebellion has been dealt with. After that, I put my final point into Slaughterlord, upgrade the capital city to rank 2 as well, and then move the Black Ark closer to my settlements, and that's pretty much it for turn 9.
Black-hearted Dreadlord. I will continue.
Now with the rebellion defeated, it's time to look towards the next threat, which is Teclis. Now, Teclis won't be attacking until turn 13 or 14, so we have a little bit of time to set up. So what you saw me do there was get the defensive building in the Mangrove Coast. This is because what we're going to be doing is having the Mangrove Coast defend itself, while we'd use Lokhir to defend the other port settlement. On turn 11, it's finally time to move Lokhir back to his starting settlement, where we will prepare to deal with Teclis himself. Outside of that, we've completed our continuous slave supply research. We will now be getting Revel in Suffering, which will increase our growth, because you will notice we haven't actually got any growth buildings apart from the ports. And then, of course, moving the Black Ark closer to our settlements. Now, I do think about getting the slave pens, but I decided it's best to get a torture post instead, because we need to increase the public order, because we don't want to get any more slaves. So that's why I get that over the slave pens. I also don't get a defensive building on Mark of the Old Ones, because within the first 20 turns, and as long as we play it right, no armies are going to actually go and attack that, so there's no point getting a defensive building there. On turn 12, I finally build a slave pens in the capital city. This will be upgraded later on into a slave market, and that's pretty much it building wise. One thing I will say though is in Mark of the Old Ones we still have that military building. I could have sold that and actually replaced it with a different building instead, because we won't be getting any military buildings at this time, and I could have also just upgraded the military building on the Black Ark, which would have provided us with the same recruits. Now, I don't upgrade the exotic animal building because for the cost, I only get an extra 50 base income, and I don't have any trade partners, so I won't make any money from it that way either. Now, turn 13 is all about prepping for turn 14, which is when Teclis will be attacking. In order to do this, I could have gone a little bit deeper in, but I decided that I only really needed 2 extra Dread Spears. Now, the reason why I chose the Dread Spears instead of the Black Ark Corsairs is just because the Dread Spears actually have the Silver Shields, which parry 55% of all projectiles shot at them. So they're a little bit better at dealing with the archers, and unfortunately, well, Teclis' army is pretty much all archers, which makes for a very casualty-heavy battle, but you'll see that shortly. Yep, and as predicted, Teclis has now declared war. Now, turn 14 isn't exactly perfect. There were a few other things I could have done. Instead, I've just recruited Black Ark, I upgrade the Mangrove Coast, and pretty much leave it at that. What I could have tried to do, though, is I could have put Lokhir in the ambush stance and tried to bait Teclis a little bit closer, and seen if I could get him to attack the settlement. If you can get him to do that, that is probably the best way to do it. You can ambush him, you get reinforcements from the settlement, and it makes the fight a lot easier. That doesn't happen though, so it was a subpar turn 14, unfortunately. But what you do see is that unfortunately Teclis doesn't actually fancy his chances against my army or my cities, and so he decides to actually back off towards the Star Tower. Now this causes an issue. While it does make us safe, it still leaves Teclis with a threatening army. Not only that, but if we are able to kill off Teclis' army, we can also get a lot of money from the actual fight, which we need to upgrade into our infrastructure, and we also get a lot of slaves as well, which once more will boost our economy massively. So we need to find a way to actually get him to come to us so we can attack him. Now, because we are playing this safe, I did actually decide to get a non-aggression pact with Itza. There's a few reasons for this. Mainly, I don't want to be staying here in the Headhunter's jungle with Lokhir. I actually want to be going to get Clark Rond because I want the Red Blades later on in the campaign. So by having or by being on friendly terms with the Lizardmen, it means that I don't have to invest in defensive buildings, and I can invest heavily into my economy, which will fund my campaign to regain Clan Car and then attack from wherever I want to after that. Now on turn 15, I realize my army is as big as it's going to be, and I don't need to recruit any more military units, so I decide to actually finally sell off the military building in mark of the old ones, and then also upgrade the Black Ark as well, in preparation for using that as my primary source of recruitment. By upgrading the Black Ark, you not only increase the building slots, but then you also make it so you can actually buy the more advanced military buildings on the Black Ark itself. One thing to note with the Black Ark as well is while the initial building does require growth to be purchased, the upgrades afterwards only cost gold, so it's important to keep that in mind.
The people grow restless.
Now, it was at this point on turn 16 that I'm able to get a little bit more money now. My economy's pretty strong, and I start investing more into trying to boost that to get even more out of it. So that's when I start building the slave pens now. And I'm also kind of at a loss at what to do with Teclis, because this was actually the first time Teclis had been too scared to attack me. So what you'll see is I will move Lokhir up, and then kind of think, actually, no, that's a bad idea, and then move him back down again. And I believe it's on turn 17 that I actually finally come up with a solution to deal with Teclis.
By the cruel seas, aboard the Tower of Blessed Dread, sacrifices to Mathlan. Bring fire and terror. Full sail.
Never.
Admiral of Kar's fleets, the Blessed Dread docks. A mutiny!
On turn 17, we finished our research, so we then get exploit feuds. Lokhir also gets a rank up as well. Now we put that into, I believe, raid leader. We do this in preparation of getting shades. I will be replacing the dark shards with shades later on in the army. I also decided it's time to finally deal with Teclis. I was a little bit sketchy about taking this fight just because he has so many archers in the army, but I decided it's time. So in order to do this, we put Lokhir in the ambush stance, and then we use the Black Ark to bait Teclis to come just a little bit closer so we can spring that trap on him.
Cease your provocations.
Now, lucky for us, Teclis does take the bait, and he moves close enough that we can actually attack him on the next turn.
Hatred fuels me. I approve of these dark.
Now, we need to use everything to our advantage to try and win this, so I do move the Black Ark close, which means the Lord will be able to provide support in that fight, and we'll also be able to use the Black Ark's artillery bombardments. Now, as you can see, Teclis' army is made up of 2 frontline infantry units, the Swordmaster of Hoeth and the Spearman. The rest are archers, a Great Eagle, a Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower, and Teclis himself, which is a very horrible combination to go against because that is a lot of range damage that we will be taking during the fight. Now, there's going to be nothing fancy about this fight. It's purely about closing the gap and basically dealing with the Swordmaster of Hoeth as quickly as we can, and then also just shutting down the archers. Now, there's a few ways to do this. Obviously, you're going to be able to see how I played out the fight, but I can't, there's no way to know that the matchup is going to be going the same way for you as it did for me. or that Teclis is going to have the same combination. So a few things to note. The Great Eagle is a big threat. It causes fear. You want to try and take that out as much as you can. Using the Manticore to shut down archer units, or you don't even have to shut them down. You can just go towards the archer units with the Manticore, and the archer units should start running. What you also notice I did there is I used the Black Ark's artillery bombardment to actually attack one of the siege units that actually destroyed it. So I've just basically took 1/3 of that damage out. You also want to basically make it so that you close the gap as quickly as possible on the archers. You can also use the Black Ark Corsair crossbows to go into melee attack and have them chase after archers and then get into melee with them. They will beat the archers in melee quite effectively, and so it's a very good method. What you'll also notice here is, for some reason, the computer sent the Great Eagle straight at me, and I was able to snipe it out extremely fast. So that was lucky. You can see that the Manticore has also gone into combat now, and is just trying to deny those archers some shots. Now, up until this point, the computer was quite content to leave its spears and the Swordmaster of Hoeth kind of in the back. So I was able to actually close the gap onto the archers relatively quickly. Now, the only range unit that I've kind of got to watch out for are the Lothern Sea Guard, just because they are a decent melee unit. But the archers, as soon as I can get in on them, it's pretty much going to be over for them. Now, we have engaged with the Swordmaster of Hoeth. Unfortunately, there is nothing melee-wise that I would possibly have that could deal with them. So I only use one melee unit to try and hold them in place, and then I completely ignore them. I also send Lokhir to try and hunt down Teclis as well, because if I can kill off Teclis with Lokhir, which shouldn't be too hard, if I can get them to be engaged, then I will shut down his use of magic and also hopefully break the army quickly. Now, as you can see, the Dread Spears did lose very fast to the Swordmaster of Hoeth. However, that also left the Swordmaster of Hoeth completely exposed to 5 regiments of Dark Shards. And lucky for me, I also had a Black Ark Corsair unit that I could put there. And then, as you saw, with that kind of focus fire, the Swordmasters really don't last that long. They broke very quickly, and now they're shattered, so they're a non-threat at all. What you can see me there is using the Black Ark Corsair to actually go into melee to attack the archers. Murderous Prowess has also been popped, and at this point we've done everything that we needed to do to win. We've closed the gap on the archers, we've taken out the Swordmasters of Hoeth. I believe Teclis is currently being attacked by Lokhir, which is great. And now the only thing that I really need to keep on top of is making sure that all units are engaged in combat or trying to get into combat. Now, the way that I do this is I use the unit bars. Now, just above, sorry, not the unit bars, the unit cards. Now, just above the unit cards, what you'll see is there's little icons. Now, all of those icons mean something. It either means that they're in combat, they're taking damage, or they're moving. Now, if there isn't an indicator above the unit card, it means that unit's not doing anything. And so it's very quick, it's a very quick method just to quite easily see if there's anything above there or not, and if there's not, you know you've got to do something with that unit. Now, if you'll notice, one of the Black Ark Corsairs next to, on the left, doesn't have anything above its head, which means it's not doing anything. So I just click on that quickly, double tap it, it shows me where it is, and then I give it a command. And that's basically how I keep on top of everything, and the fight's going pretty well. With the victory against Teclis secured here, that's pretty much the end of the guide in terms of having to deal with enemies. Teclis was kind of like the last big threat. With him taken out, he loses those Swordmasters, he loses the Eagle and the Bolt Thrower. So now the rest of the turns are pretty much spent just upgrading the province to where we would want it. And then also, we still have to deal with the Star Tower. Now, you won't see me dealing with the Star Tower in these 20 turns because it takes longer than that to deal with it. But I will talk about just what you need to do. So it's pretty much using the same tactic that we used to get Teclis to come to us. What we do is we bait out with the Black Ark, we put it close enough that the enemy can basically come and attack it, and then we put Lokhir in the ambush stance. That will, as long as Lokhir's ambush is not detected, it will pull the enemy to attack the Black Ark. You'll then retreat with the Black Ark to a safe distance, and then you'll be able to go on your turn with Lokhir and take out the army. Once that's done, you can then move over to the Star Tower, finish off the Star Tower. My preferred method of dealing with it is sacking it for all of the gold and the slaves that you'll get, and then on the next turn, razing it to the ground, wiping out the Lord Masters. Once that's done, the world's pretty much your oyster. My preferred method is to go and deal with Clan Ashen, because I want to get the Red Blades, which is a quest. I think it spawns on around turn 40 or something like that. So getting that as a unique item is really good. In terms of the Headhunter's Jungle Province, now my preferred method is extremely greedy. It's not for everybody. And it can backfire. In fact, later on in this campaign, it does backfire. But I did get a lot of money out of it. So what you do now is you keep the lizard men happy, just by not attacking them, basically, and they won't go to war with you. The Vampire Coast factions will also end up going, being friendly with you as well later on. And as long as you keep the lizard men happy and the Vampire Coast happy, you don't have to worry about threats. So all you need to do is make sure that you've got enough buildings to keep your public order in the positive, and then also invest the rest of it into gold or economy buildings. So you want the slave pens. You also want any economy buildings that give base income, because what happens is your base income is multiplied by the slaves. And then you also want your slave market, and then getting, I think, the Dreadmants as well is kind of important for public order, and just go from there. And that's pretty much the first 20 turns. At that point on, there's so many different variables that I can't really make a guide upon that, but this gives you a nice base to start from. You can see how to deal with your starting threats, how to secure your entire province, and then go from there. In this one, unfortunately, we did get another rebellion, but it's okay. Like, having 1 or 2 rebellions isn't going to be the end of the world. And because now I've dealt pretty much with Teclis as a main threat, I can focus more on building up the province. And that's it. So thank you for watching, guys. I will be posting a link to the rest of the VOD for this playthrough, because I'm currently playing that on Twitch. If you liked the guide, feel free to follow and subscribe, and I will be doing more of these. I'm also going to be pulling up a poll on Twitter, and allow you guys to kind of vote on which faction you would like to see next, because these guys take a while, so I'd prefer to get the ones out there that you guys are actually looking forward to. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you all later.